Hi everyone, today I am going to talk the chemical reaction and the equation, the first chapter of class 10th. That you may struggles in the chemistry because the chemistry you have to remember the many many equations, chemical equations first time in class 10th because you get to see by the many equation. So for this you have to understand that type of chemical reaction, what is the chemical reaction, what is the physical reaction, then you will get to understood the base of chemistry, how the chemistry work and what is the classification of the type of reaction. Then you will start feeling too that the chemistry somewhere is easy, because the chemistry seems to be harder because you are not able to understand what do you mean by this all reaction. So for this I am going to teach you the chemical reaction and the equation, in which I am going to talk about the type of reaction, physical reaction, chemical reaction, properties that you understood through which it is a chemical reaction or physical reaction. So starting with the physical changes. So what is the meaning of physical changes and the chemical changes? We have to understand that meaning of physical changes. So the physical changes can be defined as a type of change in which the state of substances change. Only the state of substances, only the state of substances changes. A state of substances change, then we will call that it is a type of physical reaction. But in the chemical reaction, how will you determine and what is the definition of the chemical reaction? So when the chemical composition changes, or when where, or you could also define as when the formula it changes of a substances, then we will call it is a chemical reaction. So you could say that the change in chemical formula, change in chemical formula, then we will call it is a chemical reaction, change in chemical formula. So then we will call that it is a type of chemical reaction. So we get to understood that physical reaction in which there is no change in the formula unit, only change in the color, state, and like this. A state means if it is in solid, it is converted into the liquid. If it is in liquid, converted into the solid and gaseous form, then we will call the change in state. But in the chemical reaction, change in the chemical formula, not only the state. There is many characteristic that is shown in the chemical reaction. So for this we have to understood that, as you able to know, as you consider that, let's suppose here is something curding of the milk. It is a physical change or chemical change. Then you may confuse that there is change in a state. So it can be also a physical change, but it is a chemical change. So how will you determine that it is a chemical change? You know that only one way, that change in the chemical formula, but you don't know why. Just looking over the curd you cannot determine what is the chemical formula of this milk and what is the chemical formula of this curd. So there are many things that determine that here is a change in chemical composition, or it is a type of chemical changes. There are many properties or the characteristic is shown in the chemical changes. So what are those characteristic? So ch characteristic. So for this we have to understand that we have many characteristic. First is the change in a state. If you able to see that there is change in a state, then you could say that it is a chemical change. But not only just saying that change in a state, then it is a chemical change, because the change in a state also happen in the physical. So second characteristic which you could say, change in temperature. If you able to see that, then you could say a change in temperature. Temperature can be also written in the chemistry like this, we call them delta. And the another thing which you will say that it is a chemical change, that change in temperature, change in state, and change in color. When you able to see that there is a change in color, then you could also say that it is a type of chemical change. And the fifth thing which you will able to see that evolution of gas. Evolution of gas, that means the change in chemical state. So evolution of gas we called is the property or characteristic to show that it is a chemical change. And the fifth thing which you have to remember that the formation of precipitate. And what is the meaning of formation of precipitate? What is the meaning? This is denoted like this by this arrow. Sorry, it is denoted the gas like this down arrow. So what is the meaning of formation of precipitate? So the precipitate means when insoluble solid is formed. Insoluble solid is formed, then we will call it is a precipitate. Let's suppose we have done a reaction. It is mainly a type of double displacement reaction. So we have conduct a reaction in which there is a formation of multiple product, but a type of product is formed in the water, but it is not soluble in the water. Then we name those product as a precipitate, that it is formed during the reaction but it is not soluble in the water. So this is why the precipitate is called the insoluble substances. We call them the precipitate. So I think you get to understood why the physical change, chemical change, characteristic being shown into the chemical change. And now we have to also understood that what is a skeletal reaction and what is the skeletal reaction and the valence reaction. The second topics in this chapter we have, which is the unbalanced reaction and the valence reaction. So what do you mean by this? As you know that let's suppose this is can be understood by the formation of water. So how the water is formed? How the water is formed, if I will ask you. So as you all know that water is formed when the H2 or O2 combine to form the H2O. So if you able to see that we have this reaction when the H2 and O2 combine to form the H2O. So if you able to see that here we have the two molecule of the hydrogen or two atom of the hydrogen and two atom of the oxygen, but here you have only one atom of oxygen and two atom of hydrogen. So as you are able to see that we have here the two atom of hydrogen, we have also the two atom of hydrogen, but here we have the two atom of oxygen, but here we have only one atom of oxygen. So we have to make both the side equal, because you have studied a law that in a chemical reaction you have studied that the mass is neither be created nor be destroyed, only can change in its form. So that you have to make it equal, because mass in a chemical reaction cannot be destroyed, only can change its form. So here also the mass remains the constant. You have studied the name as the Lavoisier. We have in Lavoisier scientist which you studied in class 9th chemistry, that mass cannot be created or destroyed in a chemical reaction. The mass will always remains the equal in the both side, reactant side and product side. This is called the reactant side because the reaction occur in this side, and this is called the product side because of formation of product after the reaction. But so if the chemical reaction is unbalanced, we name as the skeletal chemical reaction. We name as a skeletal chemical reaction, which is asked many frequently here, that you have to remember what is the skeletal chemical reaction. So you will say that when the unbalanced reaction is seen, then we will call the skeletal. And what is the how will you balance this one? So we have to study which is the heat and trial method in class 10th to balance the chemical reaction. So as we have the two, so for this you have to apply a method that is the heat and trial method. But for this, how will you start this method? You have to see in which compound we have the number of atom or the element which is the larger. So you are able to see that in this compound the number of element which is the larger. So you have to start balancing to this. So as you are able to see that hydrogen is balanced already, you have to balance the oxygen. So we have the oxygen here the 1 and here we have the 2. So multiply here the 2. So when you multiply here the 2, hydrogens becomes the 2, and we have already also here the 2, but oxygen becomes the 2, but here hydrogens become the 4 because already we have the 2 and multiplied by the 2, so it's become the 4. So multiply here by the 2, so it also become the 4 here. Now here we have the 2 oxygen, and here we have also the 2 oxygen, because 1 we have, and when 1 is multiplied the 2, it's become the 2. And I think you get to understood, and in the next video I am going to teach about the type of chemical reaction that you have to study. And thank you for today.